But there was no feast, nor song that night, for our dead were beyond the count of grief. We few had survived. And I thought to myself then, there is one who I could follow. There is one I could call king.
What's up, my dudes? Yep, I made a dwarf UI. I am that obsessed. I probably need help, but I imagine that some people are sort of in the same obsessive boat as I am. And for you guys, I did my best to make this UI as symmetrical, clean, easy to use as possible, while still providing that obvious dwarf theme to the whole thing. My last UI video covered every individual add-on that are pretty much in this UI already. I went through the commands, the settings, all these different things. In this video, we're just covering the download process, any add-ons that were added to this UI that weren't in the last, and important face value features that you should know going into this. You'll find the commands to each add-on if you want to access any settings in the description below, and a brief description of what the add-on is all about, and also a link to the old UI video so that you can learn about every individual add-on if that's your intent. If you just want to download and start playing, then you just have to follow me for the next couple of minutes. I first need you guys to go into the game. Once you enter in with any of your characters, you have to hit escape, go into system, hit the advanced tab, and at the bottom of the advanced tab you'll see this checkbox with a slider next to it. You have to make sure that checkbox is marked on. As it was with the last UI, you have to have a 16:9 aspect ratio resolution for this whole thing to work right here on the screen, so you can check out whether your screen works with this. To change your resolution easily, you have to go into the battle.net client, and up at the options drop-down menu, you hit game settings, check additional command line arguments, and enter -1920 x 1080. Hit enter from there, leave the battle.net client open, and we'll come back to it. In the description of this video, underneath the text it says download classic dwarf UI here. Go through that link and you can download the zip file to the UI. Extract the zip file to wherever you want, then open it up. Now drag it to the side of your screen like so. Next to this, we have to have open your original classic WoW folder, so navigate back to that battle.net client that we left open, go to options, and below you'll see show and explorer. Once you're through, drag that folder to the other side of the screen. In the original World of Warcraft folder, go into World of Warcraft, Classic, then WTF. Also open up the classic dwarf UI WTF folder as well. Copy this config file you have in your original folders and paste it in the classic dwarf UI WTF folder here. Then open up this newly pasted config file with any text application that you got. Now while we're here, we want to edit the line that says set UI scale, so you have to hit Control F and search up UI scale that way. If you don't have this line, you can type the following manually at the bottom. Whatever set UI scale number you have here, you need to change it to 0.85. So make sure it looks like this, then you want to hit File, Save. Now close that out, and as shown on screen, go into the account folders of both sides. In your original classic folder, you should see your account name in all caps. If you just see a series of numbers, that's fine too. But if you have several accounts and maybe you see a series of folders here, what you can do is go into each folder and just check which characters are designated to that folder so that you know which account name to copy. If you want to have the UI for all of your multiple accounts, if you have more than one, just duplicate this My Account folder in the classic dwarf UI folder and repeat the steps that we're just going to be doing for the one account. Now finally, rename this My Account folder in all caps to what your account name is, or once again, you can also make it the series of numbers if that's what your original folder shows. Now in the classic dwarf folder side, you want to go into this account folder and rename the server name folder here to whichever server your main character is on. Once that folder is renamed, navigate into it and rename this folder to your main character's name. Now in the classic dwarf folder side, navigate all the way back to the root folder as shown. On the original folder side, go back to _classic_. In your original classic folder, delete WTF and interface. Copy the classic dwarf UI interface and WTF folders, paste those into the original classic folder. Okay, now you can close these windows out and let's open up the game. Enter in with your main character and you're going to see this prompt that says new character detected. Do you wish to load the settings for classic dwarf UI? Hit yes for that, but if that prompt isn't there, all you have to do is type in /reflux space switch space power hour. With that done, the last thing to change is the mini map. Right click it and at the bottom of the window that shows up, you want to copy a profile from Grobbulus. Hit accept to the prompt that comes up. If you want to change anything around this UI and save your settings, just make sure that after you make changes, you type in /reflux space save. And then to update that UI and every other character, just make sure to hit accept to that prompt when you log in, or type in the command /reflux space switch space power hour, as we did before. I recommend to use the add-on weapon swing timer that's built into this UI. On your character, type in /WST. On the bottom of the window that opens up, you'll see weapon swing timer. The plus symbol next to it, you click, go into hunter and wand settings, and at the top hit enable. This add-on is great for kiting mobs in an efficient way. The setup for this UI is now complete. As for the fundamentals, here's what you need to know. If at any point while you play you experience lag, you can hit the performance plugin on the HealCommClassic bar below. That'll automatically delete all the unnecessary cache files that some of your add-ons will build up over time. Keep in mind for the action bars below, you may want to switch around some of your abilities and rebind these keys, as this is the order that the bars are laid out in. They're laid out in such a way that you have the absolute maximum amount of action bars possible that don't also interfere with warrior stance bars, druid form bars, and rogue stealth. If you look at the very bottom right of your screen, you can see a couple buttons for the add-ons in this UI that I think will be frequently used for you guys. The first is the dominoes button. You can mouse over it to see what kind of stuff you can do there. So for example, you want to shift left click it if you want to rebind some of these keys here, which I think most people will probably want to do. You got Atlas Loot there, you can just left click that button. NovaWorldBuffs is a new one that we added to this UI. We'll go over that in detail later, but you can left click that to see what kind of world buffs you got on your character at the time, as well as other characters if you're raid logging. As well as PallyPower there. I figure enough dwarves play this class for me to throw this into the UI, but you can remove that if you want to. You also got your volume and time buttons there, which you could configure as need be. On the right, we have the well-known Threat Classic 2 add-on. I think most people have this at this point. I put it closest to the center among all the meters because I just think in the immediate it's the most important thing for people. And then we have two details windows here that I locked in. You could reposition these, you can make more windows, that's all up to you. But of course, just right click the headers if you want to change the windows to whatever you prefer. Going back to HealCommClassic on the bottom of the screen here, keep in mind you got durability, your gold amount, zone, bags, and performance. And you can actually left click bags if you want to just quickly open up your bags from there. Another add-on that we added to the UI is Item Rack. I made a video about this separate to the old UI video. I'll put a link to that below. But one recommendation that I have for you guys with this add-on that I'd actually never mentioned is that you can create a macro that says /item rack space OPT. You put it in your bindings and then you can set it to whatever key. I have it set to tilde, so whenever I hit tilde, it just automatically opens up that window for me and I can customize whatever kind of sets I'm trying to work on. When you go into the auction house to quickly undercut any item that you're trying to sell, just alt left click the item in question and the add-on auctionator that's in this UI will automatically undercut by a couple copper, or you can configure this if you want, and then you can sell, and it's as easy as that. Without the original map in place, we can't actually use stopwatches here, so I wanted to get an add-on that can actually help us with that. So I got the add-on more stopwatches, and we'll go over this later. I mean, it's as simple as what I'm about to explain, which is that really just type in /SW and you'll be able to create your own stopwatches. So if you're trying to time a raid or whatever you're trying to time, then you can have that available to you now. One feature that I really like in Bagnon is if you go into your bags, on that little brush button on the very top, you just hit that and it reconfigures your bag so that it organizes everything. Also on the left side of your mini-map, the topmost horizontal action bar is the bar that will change with your stances, with your forms, with stealth, so just keep that in mind as you switch around your buttons here. That's more or less it, guys. We'll go over the stuff that was added in more detail in a second here. As for the add-ons that we added to this UI on top of the Power Hour UI, the first in question is BuffTimers. This is super simple. You don't have to change any settings or nothing. The only thing that's different is that the BuffTimers on the top right of your screen now have the seconds markers on them, so you just get a more accurate look at your remaining buff time. I added HealCommClassic. It said that Luna Unit Frames has this built in already, but I wanted to just be absolutely sure when I added this, so this also doesn't require any setting manipulation. It just helps so that you can see other people's incoming heals as opposed to just your own. The next add-on that I added is InstanceCounter. For this, you can probably tell from the name, but what it does is it tells you how many instances you entered in the last hour, and of course in the last 24 hours, because you have that 30 instance lockout time. Pretty much the most important command is /IC space time. To get a more specific look at which instances you entered, whether it be a raid or just a group instance, between all of your characters, there's a really cool feature. You can just type in /IC space print all. More commands can be found by typing in /IC. For item rack and item tooltip profession icons, I have a link to a video that I created a while back, separate to the Power Hour UI video, and I'll navigate you guys to that. It's a pretty in-depth look at basically what you can do with these two add-ons and what you can expect. A fundamental command for item rack is /item rack, one word, space OPT. This will open up the window where you can configure any of the sets that you want to create. And if you have any questions, just hit that video below first. Anything more than that, feel free to comment below. I'll help you out. Next is more stopwatches. Stopwatches. This add-on doesn't really have any options to configure. The only feature about it is that you can use stopwatches with this UI now. It's pretty cool. All you have to do is type in /SW or /timer, and if you want to make a name for the stopwatch, you can do that by hitting space to those prior commands and then just entering in a name that you want for that. NovaWorldBuffs you can open up by hitting that button on the bottom right of the screen. Looks like a little dragon head. You can change all the settings that you want to by hitting that red options button. You can see the remaining times left on Onyxian and Nefarian buffs. And a cool feature with this is that if you're on the Horde and you go into the map of Orgrimmar, or for the Alliance into the map of Stormwind, you can see on the bottom right the timers there as well, so you don't have to actually open up this window to see that, but that's just another option. You can also go to the Elwyn Forest or Mulgore respective locations to see the timers remaining on Darkmoon Faire. And one last thing with this add-on is that in the options menu there, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, this drop-down box for the Darkmoon Faire fortune teller, you can configure as you like, select what you prefer for your character before you get the buff, and when you talk to the NPC that gives you this fortune, it'll automatically for you go through this dialogue and get you the right buff that you want. That way, if you're surrounded by a lot of baddies, this will be your best option to get out of there as soon as possible. Next up, we have PallyPower. To see the commands for this, you can just type in /PP. I recommend to left-click the PallyPower button on the bottom right of the screen here. It'll open up your blessing assignments, and you can configure that for yourself and other pallies as you like. Also, go into the options menu here to change around anything that you like. For Threat Classic 2, you can type in /TC2 to open up the options window. You can change a couple settings here. Only thing I really manipulated was the appearance. For some people, maybe you would want to have this warning flashing red screen effect that you can enable on the warnings tab. You can also enable the sound for that, so anytime you're really high on threat, there's pretty much no way you won't know. Next up is a big add-on called Weakauras. I'm sure many of you have heard about it. Many of you probably use it already. The way Weakauras works is that it's basically an add-on that can create mini add-ons. That's how I think about it, and you can import these mini add-ons, so to speak, from wago.io. Just make sure you go into the classic version, and you can look around in here and import any Weakauras that you like. Most people seem to want to use Weakauras for notifications on when their cooldowns are done so they can use those abilities again. So what you can do in wago.io is you go to the Weakaura page, you hit this copy classic Weakaura import string button on the top right. After doing so, you can go back into your game, and remember on the very top of this Weakauras window that you get into by typing /WA, there's this import button, and you hit that Control-V on this text box and just hit import. Usually everything is already set up for you. The only thing you really have to manipulate is the positioning of the Weakaura on your screen, so that's up to you. For the last set of add-ons that were added to this UI that weren't in the original video, we have WideQuestLog and WideQuestLogLevels. I made a video about this which I'll post below, but these add-ons really speak for themselves. You hit L to go into the quest log, and any quests that have check marks next to them are tracked quests. You can track or untrack them by shift left clicking these quests, and this add-on basically helps us to see more quests in this window, as opposed to where the Blizzard UI quest log was a little bit more compact. One thing I did was I actually removed the quest tracker. To re-enable this, the way that I do it is I type /questy, go to the tracker tab, enable header, and left click this header that pops up, and it'll show you your available tracked quests if it's not already showing for you. Now, I'm just going to post on the screen the following add-ons that have been removed from the former UI. The reasons that all of these are basically gone is either that they're obsolete or that I found myself not really using them much, if at all. If there's any preference to bring any of the still working ones back, then I can make that happen for you guys. So really briefly, because this is a dwarf theme UI, I did want to go over the design choices that I made here. Maybe one of the more obvious things that you might notice is on the side of the player and target frames, you have these heavily armored dwarves facing each other. So this is actually straight from the Hobbit movie. It's concept art for the Erebor dwarves, the final product you get to, of course, see in the movies. On the middle wooden frame above the minimap is a line of Khuzdul. It actually refers to Balin, and it says Lord of Moria. That's when Balin had a short rule over Moria, and if you know Balin, he was of course one of the main dwarves in the pack for the Hobbit movies. It's kind of a cool thing there. The dwarf on the threat meter, if you don't know already, that is Dane Ironfoot II. He is part of the line of Durin's folk, just like the other guys on these meters. He was king of the Iron Hills. Really cool character. He had a long rule, and I think he's one of the better leaders in the history of the dwarves. The middle meter features Thorin Oakenshield. He was also in the Hobbit movies. He's son of Thrain, who's son of Thror, and Thror is on the very right. We get to see Thror, Thorin, and Dane all in the Hobbit trilogy. Thror, of course, ruled over Erebor prior to Smaug coming in and sort of decimating the place before the dwarves took it back later down the line. The dwarven head with the crossed hammers above the minimap is not a reference to the movies. It's just a PNG that I imported into the game, and I think it just represents the dwarves pretty well. It just feels like a cool positioned thing right there for this design. Behind the minimap with this red and silver sort of framing thing, those are actually two Erebor dwarf shields. Just like the armored dwarves on either side of the unit frames. These shields are also concept art for the Hobbit movies. The action bar frames I created in Photoshop and imported into the game. They're supposed to be these runic borders because in Khuzdul, which is sort of like this runic language, the action bar skins here are play on that runic sort of border style that you might see in literature. The texture that I chose on the bottom of the screen for Titan Panel Classic is also supposed to be sort of like a runic sort of texture. It's not really, but it's sort of the closest thing I could find that Titan Panel Classic had already preset. In my view, it sort of has that dwarven style to it, where their stone crafting ability was unmatched. So to me, it just felt like that was the right thing to go with. That same idea pertains to a lot of the frames that you'll see around this UI, like around the chat, meters, and tooltip. These are actually built-in Blizzard created borders. I wanted to incorporate that in some way because it had that sort of stonecraft feel about it. As for the unit frames with the player target and target of target, their background textures are these wooden frames latched on by chains. And this is not a call or reference to anything specific for dwarves. It just feels like, to me, if a dwarf was going to hang a sign or something, then this could be one of the options. That's basically all there's to say about the design. If you guys ever have recommendations for future themes for a UI, then I could potentially get into that. I might consider creating a Burning Crusade UI. I really got to think about that. We will see. Other than that, I hope you guys enjoy this UI. If you have any questions, hit me in the comments below or go through the Discord in the description. We have a whole community that helps each other out. Other than that, thanks for sticking around. You guys are the best. I'll see you soon.